All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. How's everybody out there? Good. And good morning to those of you who are out there on Zoom. I hope you're enjoying our conference and wish everybody who was on Zoom could be here live. And I know that's not always possible, but we had an amazing experience yesterday, something I will never forget. Those of us who chose to here went to the Civil Rights Museum and had an amazing tour by Ryan Jones. And it's something, again, I will never forget. And then also, after we finished that, several of us went down to Beale Street and enjoyed some really amazing foods. Some of us went down to B.B. King's. If you haven't been there, if you have an opportunity, it was some of the best food I have ever had. So definitely make avail of that if you have the opportunity, because it's a special part of Memphis. So today is Saturday, April 15th, 2023. And we're at the conference where we're exploring the political assassinations of the 1960s. We've already had a number of amazing speakers and presenters, and we still have a number yet to come. So let's go ahead and get started right away. It is my honor to go ahead and introduce our next presenter. And the next presenter, for those of you who are out on Zoom, you may have seen him in and out a little bit. He's been our sound person, our video guy. He's been our Zoom master. He's the room wizard. He wears many hats, and he's also an amazing presenter. And I had the opportunity to first see him, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago at the JFK conference. And I've been very impressed with this man, and I got to see some of his presentations over the years, and I think we're in for something really, really special. Let me go ahead and give you a little bit of his bio. Our next presenter is David Knight. He's been an academic researcher and lecturer on the murder of John F. Kennedy since 1989. He has produced 9 documentary films with Project JFK CSI Dallas, 2 with William Matson Law, and he's currently writing a book on the murder of President John F. Kennedy. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome David Knight.
Okay. And thank you for that wonderful introduction, Don. I'm David Knight with Project JFK CSI Dallas, and my cohorts, my co-directors are Casey Quinlan and Brian Edwards. Unfortunately, Brian couldn't make the trip, and Casey's still recovering from the back injury that he sustained in the car crash, but he is getting better, and we should hopefully have both of them in Dallas for the 60th anniversary. And one of our taglines is on the right side of history. Our website is projectjfk.com, and you can look at the banner that Don made us back there, and if you have any issues, you can always just scan the QR code and go right to our website. Seriously? Yeah, go ahead and just switch slides, DJ. Yeah. So I'm an author, researcher, videographer, and a filmmaker. Okay, the presentation that you're about to see is going to be presented in the format as if I'm teaching it in a classroom to students. So today you are my students. Welcome to my class. Medgar Evers 101. The class syllabus will contain the early life of Medgar Evers, details about his personal life, accomplishments and highlights through his lifetime, his assassination, the aftermath of his death, the trials of his assassin, and the conviction of Byron D. LeBeckwith, and Medgar Evers' legacy. So let us begin. The early life of Medgar Evers. Medgar Wiley Evers was born on July 2, 1925 in Decatur, Mississippi. He experienced racism while growing up. At the age of 12, a family friend was lynched, and his bloody clothes were hung on a fence for over a year as intimidation. There were white gangs that would patrol his neighborhood looking for potential victims to terrorize. He dropped out of high school at the age of 17 and joined the Army to fight in World War II. He was stationed at a segregated field battalion in England and in France. Segregation not only happened at home in the United States, but it also happened in the armed forces. He served alongside his brother Charles. After a racial incident, he told his brother, "When we get out of the Army, we're going to straighten this thing out." This is James Charles Evers. Medgar's younger brother was also a civil rights activist, businessman, radio personality, and politician. Charles was elected the mayor of Fayette as the first African-American mayor since Reconstruction. He took over from Medgar after his assassination as field director of the NAACP. Here's a photograph of Medgar in the Army. Evers received an honorable discharge in 1946 after 3 years of distinguished military service. His rank at the time of leaving the Army was as a sergeant. After returning home, he finished high school and got his diploma. In 1948, he enrolled at Alcorn Agriculture and Mechanical College, a historically black college known today as Alcorn State University. He majored in business administration. Details about his personal life. While attending the college, he met Merle Beasley and would marry her on December 24, 1951. It was her first day of school when they met, and she fell in love with him. They moved to Mound Bayou and had 3 children together, Daryl Kenyatta, Rena Denise, and James Van Dyke Evers. Mound Bayou was a town developed by African Americans. Merle Evers would join her husband in his endeavors to fight racism and to achieve civil rights for African Americans. She also became his full-time secretary when he established an office in Mississippi for the NAACP. She was also a crusader in her own right in the civil rights movement. Some of her duties were as a helpmate, researcher for speeches, hostess, chauffeur, and musician. And these are some of the photographs of happy times and good times, from the wedding, just sitting at home relaxing, and the children. Accomplishments and highlights through his lifetime. Medgar was a salesman at TRM Howard's Magnolia Mutual Insurance Company. He was president of the Regional Council of Negro Leadership, the RCNL. He was named the first field secretary for the NAACP for Mississippi on November the 24th, 1954. He was involved with James Meredith's efforts to enroll in the University of Mississippi in 1962. Now, just like any great class, here's your chance to earn extra credit. James Meredith. He was inspired by JFK in 1961. He applied to the University of Mississippi, an all-white university, twice denied admittance. JFK and RFK had a series of phone calls with Governor Ross Barrett telling him to admit Meredith. RFK ordered 127 U.S. Marshals, 316 deputized U.S. Border Patrol agents, 97 Federal Bureau of Prison officers to accompany Meredith upon his arrival and registration. And he needed that protection. October 1st, 1962, Meredith became the first African-American student to enroll at the University of Mississippi. These photographs, we see JFK and RFK on the phone, James Meredith in the middle being escorted, and the smug son of a bitch, Governor Ross Barnett on the side. The NAACP and the Supreme Court. Brown v. Board of Education, 1954. Now, James Meredith had seen the Brown v. Board of Education. This is why he applied, because he wanted to not have separate but equal. He wanted to be into the college of his choice and not be segregated. The case began in 1951 in Topeka, Kansas, my home state. The decision partially overruled the court's decision of 1896 in Plessy v. Ferguson. Separate but equal was being argued in the case. It was a legal doctrine in the United States constitutional law. Brown v. Board of Education overturned separate but equal with a ruling by the Supreme Court. The decision was unanimous, 9-0. The Chief Justice at the time was Earl Warren. Oh yeah, we know who he is. Warren Commission, JFK. The case was argued by the NAACP Chief Counsel Thurgood Marshall. This was the ruling decision of Brown v. Board. We conclude that in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. Separate educational facilities are inherently unequal. Therefore, we hold that the plaintiffs and others similarly situated for whom the actions have been brought are by reason of the segregation complained of deprived of the equal protection of the laws guaranteed by the 14th Amendment. Here's your second shot at extra credit. Thurgood Marshall, assistant to Charles Houston, special counsel, NAACP. Later became the special counsel with the NAACP. JFK appointed him to the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. LBJ nominated him as Solicitor General. LBJ appointed him to the United States Supreme Court, the first African-American Supreme Court justice. He served the Supreme Court for 24 years. These photographs at the decision of Brown v. Board on the left, that's them outside the courthouse. In the middle is LBJ with Thurgood. And then we see him in his robe as a Supreme Court justice with his fellow 8 members, making up the 9 on the judge panel. I remember, has anybody seen a HBO? It was actually a play at the Kennedy Center, but it was played by Thurgood Marshall. He gets up there and gives a hour and a half, 2-hour monologue. It's a one-man show, but when you first start seeing him walk on stage, you know it's Lawrence Fishburne. But by the time you get done, as a great actor that he is, he becomes Thurgood Marshall. And one of the funny lines I remember that took place when Nixon was president and Thurgood had to go into to the hospital, he said that the doctors came in, they thought he was on his deathbed. And he said, write this down in case the president calls. And he goes, okay, what do you want me to write down? He goes, not yet, goddammit. That's what, he didn't want to be removed off of the bench, and he wasn't ready to go. Back to Medgar Evers. Medgar Evers lived through a constant threat of death. His home was firebombed. He was almost run down by an automobile. He would have an escort home after leaving work. He would be followed home by at least 2 FBI cars and a police car. On the morning of his assassination, though, he had no escort home. Some people thought it was because some of the police were part of the Ku Klux Klan. The reason for no escort that night was never told by the FBI or the police department. Kind of like how the Secret Service drops balls on JFK. His assassination. Let's talk about his assassination. Medgar Evers' assassination on June 12, 1963, JFK addressed the nation about the civil rights, and he called it a moral crisis. That same night at midnight, after returning home from work, Medgar Evers was gunned down in his driveway. It was not a quick death. He didn't die instantly. He died 50 minutes later after being shot. His wife and 3 children knelt beside him under the carport, begging him to get up, but he never did. He was assassinated by Byron de la Beckwith. He was 37 years old when he was killed, still a young man, still had a whole life in front of him and great things to do.
We are confronted primarily with a moral issue. It is as old as the Scriptures and is as clear as the American Constitution. The heart of the question is whether all Americans are to be afforded equal rights and equal opportunities, whether we are going to treat our fellow Americans as we want to be treated. If an American, because his skin is dark, cannot eat lunch in a restaurant open to the public, if he cannot send his children to the best public school available, if he cannot vote for the public officials who represent him, if, in short, he cannot enjoy the full and free life which all of us want, then who among us would be content to have the color of his skin changed and stand in his place? Who among us would then be content with the counsels of patience and delay? 100 years of delay have passed since President Lincoln freed the slaves, yet their heirs, their grandsons, are not fully free. They are not yet freed from the bonds of injustice. They are not yet freed from social and economic oppression. And this nation, for all its hopes and all its boasts, will not be fully free until all its citizens are free.
Now, that speech was given on June 11, 1963. Medgar Evers was doing an NAACP function at the time that broadcast was done. Byron de la Beckwith was on his way to get ready to set up to kill Medgar Evers, to assassinate him. Now, unfortunately, not like what they do today with the presidential speeches, you don't usually hear it on the radio, but back in the 1960s, if it was on TV, it also broadcast on the radio. So in his premeditation of driving to get to the point to assassinate Medgar at his home, this was played. And I'm sure that it, infuriated him, pissed him off, and it just gave him extra gumption, I guess, to do the deed of assassinating Medgar Evers. Now, in these two photographs, this is Medgar's car under the carport. You can see there's a little bit of blood right back here, and my pointer's not working, but there's a little bit of blood back here by the back tire. There's a lot more blood up by the step where he was shot at. The African American community was angered at the death of Evers. The FBI investigated and they found their suspect in Beckwith. They found his fingerprints on a rifle left at the murder scene. It would take 3 murder trials before he would be found guilty of the crime. 2 all white, verdicts not guilty, and 1 mixed race jury, guilty. This is the Jackson Daily News newspaper headline. State reacts to the slaying with shock. Rifle found, believed gun that killed Evers. Weapon discovered near the ambush scene. Yeah, right across the street. And in this photograph here, we see a bullet hole that actually went through the windshield. So he didn't give, Byron D. Beckwith didn't give a damn about Medgar Evers. He didn't care about his family, who he could have shot with that bullet. Once that bullet leaves the gun, you can't call it back. So it could have hit not only Medgar, it could have hit his wife, his children. These photographs here, we see the rifle being found in the bushes and dragged out. The aftermath of his death. Hundreds of supporters lined the street the day that he was laid to rest. On the right side, we see Merle and Medgar's brother and one of Medgar's sons. This, I believe, is Daryl. Yes, thank you. The last time that Merle would kiss her husband goodbye. And then there's a copy of the Life magazine and a colored version of what we just saw with Merle comforting Daryl. Now, me and Brian took a trip in 2019 to go up to meet Oliver Stone. And first place we went was Arlington National Cemetery. And it wasn't just to visit, JFK's grave. Obviously, that was, a key point. But there's so many other graves to visit while we were there. 2 of the graves I visited that morning was 1, Thurgood Marshall, and 2 was Medgar Evers. If you get a chance to go to Washington and go there, he's in Section 36, Lot 1431, Grid BB 40. Now, here's the thing I want to take a quick second here and tell you a little bit of a story of, as far as going to middle school, junior highs, high schools, some college campuses. When it comes to talking about political assassinations of the 1960s, we always hear Martin Luther King Jr., we always hear about Malcolm X. But when I go in and I ask the students, do you know who Medgar Evers is? Have you heard his name before? Do you know what he did? Do you know how many students actually put their hand up and say yes or shake their head? About 0. I might have 1, I might have 2. He was just as important as Martin Luther King Jr., just as important as Malcolm X. And he's on the same plane, but we don't talk about him. And there's not a reason other than the fact that he's overlooked. I know when I asked the kids, I said, do you know who Martin Luther King Jr. is? Well, yeah, we get an extra day off of school. I said, but you understand that's not the reason why we celebrate and have a holiday for him. And I asked them, I said, what about Medgar Evers? And they said, well, we don't know. So this is when I go in and I give a presentation because he shouldn't be forgotten. This is the 60th anniversary of his death. So this is the first time that we've actually, included him. I know Ryan has talked about Medgar and mentioned him in his presentations just like he did in Dallas. But this is a presentation to explore his life and his assassination. And then when I'm done, Ryan will come up and he's going to add some stuff to this as well. So I'm glad that we're actually acknowledging and having a presentation from Medgar Evers. I'm sorry that we haven't had it done before now instead of waiting until the 60th anniversary to get it done. Well, let's talk about Byron D. Beckwith. 1921 to 2001. He was a white supremacist, a murderer, Ku Klux Klan member, and by trade he was a salesman, fertilizer, tobacco, basically whatever he could sold or sell. And my personal favorite, piece of shit. The trial of his assassin and the conviction of Byron D. LeBeckwith. There was 2 trials in 1964, and like I mentioned a while ago, they were all white juries. Now, back in the 60s, and before that, if a white man would kill a black man, good luck getting that white man to be actually sentenced and serve any jail time for killing a black man. And if a jury found him guilty or them guilty, just like we've seen in some of the trials before, the judge would actually take that and set the verdict aside. Why? The judge was white as well. So it was okay to do this in their eyes. It wasn't okay, but that's what happened. And unlike in court proceedings of today, they didn't have video cameras in the courtroom, so they did drawings, and these 2 drawings show a depiction of an all-white jury, and then also the rifle being shown in court. And God, he's a creepy son of a bitch. Look. Okay, so this is Byron and his wife going to the trial in 1994, and he's got a huge happy face, smile on his face. He didn't think he'd gotten off of it twice before. He didn't think he was going to get charged, or he didn't think he was going to get convicted of it now. Boy, was he found wrong on that. He would actually go to Klan meetings and would tell everybody that it was no different than it gave him no more pain than what a mom would have experience of delivering a child. It gave him no problem going and killing Medgar Evers, and he bragged about it. So the Clarion Ledger, and we see here Beckwith gets life term. White supremacist shows no emotion when verdict was read. Seems to have emotion here. He's happy, but he finally gets sentenced and found guilty. 1994. So let's talk about Medgar Evers' legacy. Part of his legacy is the Medgar Evers home. I will read the sign here. It says, Medgar and Merle Evers moved into the home with their children Daryl and Rena in 1955 after Medgar became Mississippi's first NAACP field secretary. Son Van was born in 1960. Evers was an outspoken activist for voter registration and social justice. Just after midnight on June 12, 1963, he was assassinated in the driveway as he returned from a meeting. After his death, the family moved to California and deeded the home to Tougaloo College as a historic house museum. And if you have an opportunity to go through Mississippi, I know I'm planning on my trip this year. I'm going to go and take a tour of the house. It's located at 2332 Margaret West Alexander Drive, Jackson, Mississippi. And the house really hasn't changed. I mean, it's like going back to a time capsule. Even the furniture, it may not be the original, but it's definitely part of the furniture of the time. But this 3-bedroom, 1-bath, 1-car carport garage where Medgar Evers was killed, this is not just, this is just a house. Yes, it's where it happened. It's no different than going to where we were at the hotel yesterday. It's not like, it's no different than going to Dealey Plaza. The death locations is not it's part of the legacy because we go there to learn. We go there to get information and to I don't want to say relive it, but to research and kind of take a step back in time. So Medgar Evers was more than just the house that is now a tour spot. Let's talk about the weapon today. What I'm going to do is show you now and relate the story of where some of my research has taken me. I wonder where the rifle had ended up. I tracked the rifle down, kind of like Bobby DeLauder did back when he took over the prosecution of the case in 1989. Back then, they didn't have very much evidence left from the 2 first trials. I mean, the original court transcript, witness statements. none of that was, actually in the files. The rifle was actually missing. Now, back in the day of going through the courts, after a trial ended, people took things as souvenirs. Matter of fact, the rifle was found in Bobby DeLauder's father-in-law's in his office, and he went over there one night and was looking through like a coffee table trunk, and there was a bunch of rifles in the judge's office, and he saw the rifle sitting there, pulled it out, read the serial number, and the next day he entered it into evidence. Now, he was keeping Medgar Evers. He was keeping her abreast of what was going on in the case and what they were getting, but he didn't tell her right off the bat that they had recovered the rifle. She actually wound up finding that information from Jerry Mitchell, and that started to drive a wedge between Merle and Bobby DeLauder, because she felt that he wasn't being honest, and he was afraid that it would get out to the press. It is housed at the Civil Rights Museum in Mississippi. I want to say thank you to Nan Prince in the museum for the pictures and the documents pertaining to the Weapon Today section that I'm getting ready to show you. And by the way, if you're down in Mississippi and you're going to visit Medgar's home, I would suggest going to the Mississippi Department of Archives and History. This is another stop that I'll be making. And one thing they do on the Medgar Evers assassination section is they'll show videos and they'll talk about about him and his assassination. The rifle is actually in a case, and it's got LED lights in it. And as they're talking, the lights in the case will actually come on brighter, and then they'll dim down throughout the thing to bring essence to the murder weapon itself and the story behind that. And this is a 30-06 infield with the scope. This was the rifle that was used to kill Medgar Evers. And I can't really see the documents too well here, but I did get the documents. These were, and like I say, after the trial was ended, Hinds County had the rifle in their custody. The evidence didn't walk away again. It didn't end up in another judge's office. It wound up staying in the evidence locker, and they needed to figure out what they were going to do with this. Well, it wasn't just something they were going to take and throw away. It had, historical significance. So they wound up deeding this to the, at first it was the Mississippi Department of, I forgot what they called, but basically where it would end up next, it would go to the Civil Rights Museum and be procured so people can actually go and visit it. And then this is actually the invoice copy of International Firearms Company. And this is the paper that Bobby DeLauder had when he was looking to see if he could figure out what the serial number was to the rifle. This is what he used. And it's got the serial number on there. It was 2950. So about just a little bit more expensive than the Oswald rifle. And this was actually signed by Bobby DeLauder. And I'll tell you another quip here. Once Byron de la Beckwith found out that his rifle was going to be given to the state to put it for research and have it in a museum, he protested. He wanted his damn rifle back. Well, he was already a convicted felon at this point, so he couldn't even have the rifle to begin with. But he was not happy that that's where his property, as he called it, was going to end up at. I want to give a special thanks that goes out to Jerry Mitchell. And if you haven't read his book, Race Against Time, A Reporter Opens the Unsolved Murder Cases of the Civil Rights Era, it's a great book. It's full of information, and it's not just about Medgar Evers. This covers James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, Michael Schwerner, Vernon Dahmer Sr., Addie Mae Collins, Denise McNair, Carol Robertson, Cynthia Weasley, and of course Medgar Evers. I had first heard this on audiobook, and I said, I've got to get the book so I can go in and pick pieces out, because I don't have enough time to do what I've researched on Jerry's book, but it not just covers Medgar, it'll lead into the rest of the people. But again, it's a great read. And the other things I want to give is for him basically dogging Bobby DeLauder, He worked with Merle Evers to get information and to get the case reopened. It was sitting there as basically a cold case file. They weren't doing anything with it. And every time that he felt that Bobby DeLauder wasn't doing what he should be doing, he would dog him and get him to move forward with the case. So I have thanks that goes out to this guy, because if it wasn't for him, then we may not have gotten that third trial to get the conviction. Now, most people, when I talk to them, and not just students, but I ask them, do you know about Medgar Evers? One of the things they, remember was a movie released in 1996 called Ghost of Mississippi, starring Alec Baldwin, Whoopi Goldberg, and James Woods. And it's a great movie, great acting, and pretty close to the truth. And not just that, but Medgar Evers' children was actually in the film. We see here Byron D. LeBeckwith, played by James Wood, Byron on the left and Woods on the right and in center. He was not shy about his racial ideas, and has the rebel flag behind him there. This is Bobby DeLauder and Alec Baldwin. Merle Evers, played by Whoopi Goldberg. And the thing about Woods' performance, at first he didn't want to even portray Byron D. LeBeckwith. He read the script and he I really don't want to play him, but he knew that he could bring justice to the role and bring justice into him getting convicted. And he played him as a bad guy perfect. So for 30 years, Merle Evers did not give up in getting justice for her late husband, the father to her children. Thanks to Mrs. Evers, Jerry Mitchell, Bobby DeLauder in his office, and the jury, justice was finally served. On the courthouse steps, in front of the microphones and the cameras and the reporters, Merle Evers stated, "Medgar, I've gone the last mile of the way." So Medgar Evers' 60th year anniversary. This is why we're talking about him. It's it's important, and this is the 60th anniversary. So your assignment: don't forget what you've seen and heard today. Now I'm going to show a 3-minute video here before I bring up Ryan, and we're in Memphis, so I think it's only justice we bring a little bit of Elvis into it. So thank you very much. The video I'm going to play is actually it was known as Elvis's protest song. Now, he didn't write this in '63. He wrote it after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. And he took the I Have a Dream speech and turned it into a song. And if I can only dream. So let's listen to that and pay attention to the words. And then think about what we've talked about today and what we learned at the Civil Rights Museum yesterday, and what we talked about with Martin Luther King. Another thing I'll tell you about that was actually the 1968 comeback special. Now, while they were filming that, they had to do several takes. Do you know why? It was such a powerful performance that Elvis gave that the band that he had playing behind him, they had to stop and keep wiping the tears away. They just couldn't carry on with it. It took a lot of takes to get that. And the other part of it is that song was only performed one time live. Even when he was in Vegas during his residency, he never played that song ever again. He said that was a song that he performed for the 68 comeback special. It should be a time capsule in that special. It shouldn't be played. Now, it was brought out on record and CD later, but it was only performed one time, and it was after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. So, thank you. Class dismissed. And now, let me bring up my co-teacher, Ryan Jones. Yeah. No. Yeah.
There's not much to really add on, just to give some context to the convictions of Byron D. LeBeckwith. In 1988, there was a motion picture that was released. It was called Mississippi Burning, and it featured the great Gene Hackman and William Dafoe. And the story is loosely based on the disappearances and murders of 3 civil rights workers, James Chaney, Michael Schwerner, and Andrew Goodman, whom Jerry Mitchell wrote about in Race Against Time. The film depicts the FBI as the heroes, and to seasoned Mississippi civil rights activists, this was a slap in the face some 25 years later after the event occurred. And so, like the FBI, the state of Mississippi was a police and spy state. So there was a secret organization that was formed in 1956 called the Mississippi Sovereignty Commission. And this commission was established to surveillance, to spy, to plant moles into all of these different civil rights organizations. And so when Medgar Evers is murdered in June 1963, there were two trials that came in early 1964. Both of those trials ended in hung juries. They were all white juries, but they ended in hung juries. With two trials, they decided not to retry him a third time. Well, in 1989, Jerry Mitchell, who is an investigative journalist at the Clarion Ledger in Jackson, finally was able to reopen these files. And immediately he saw in the second trial of Byron D. LeBeckwith, there was jury tampering within that courtroom. So certain jurors that were selected were members of the White Citizens Council and members of the White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. This was taken to a jury, a grand jury in Jackson in 1991, and this is how the case was reopened because of the evidence that Jerry Mitchell found it. And so when Beckwith comes down, in the state of Mississippi, dating back to the end of the Civil War in 1865, there had never been one person, or one white person, convicted of killing an African American within the state of Mississippi. Beckwith felt that it's never going to change. Well, that changed on February 5th, 1994, when he was finally convicted. And so after the release of the Sovereignty Commission files, other cold case civil rights activists who were murdered during this era, those perpetrators were finally brought to justice. And so more evidence, and as David stated, Jerry Mitchell is such a giant. He's a good friend. And I'm really happy that this organization is now recognizing Medgar Evers' assassination of the decade of the 1960s. His was the very first in June 1963, of course, followed by President Kennedy that November, Malcolm, Dr. King, and then Bobby. But Medgar Evers is the first. So thanks for that. Thanks.
Thank you, Ron.
Anytime.
Thank you. All right, time for me to get back there to where I normally belong, and I will see you again this evening for my Hoffa presentation.
Any questions?
Any questions? Sure.
How many, in those first two trials, how many of those white individuals actually, since it was a hung jury, how many of them actually did vote for conviction of Beckwith, if any?
As far as I'm aware, there was not a single conviction, or there wasn't a single vote for guilty.
Well, it was 11 and 1 and 10 and 2.
Okay.
So did anything happen to those three individuals? No? You know, the ones who actually voted honestly? You know what I mean?
Well, I'm sure that they didn't appear again in the next jury.
That's what I meant, right. Or at all.
Go ahead, Dan.
Well, I had sent David an email, and I thought it was important to mention a couple of things. I did a little trip for the book I'm writing about the 60s and had dinner with Jerry Mitchell. I interviewed Charles Evers and James Meredith all in the same day, which was pretty interesting. And one of the things that Jerry Mitchell told me about was that Sam Bowers, who was the kind of White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, the guy that was basically convicted of being behind the murders of the 3 civil rights workers and Vernon Dahmer, that he had this essentially given a state report, and Jerry told me he saw a letter where he put government officials, especially state police, as likely involved in the Medgar Evers assassination. So the idea of de Beckwith as this white lone racist guy operating on his own, lone assassin, is a little bit ridiculous. The other thing is that the murder weapon, from my understanding, was exactly the same type of murder weapon that was allegedly left by James Earl Ray at the scene of the crime. Now, 2 consecutive murders of civil rights leaders where the crime weapon is the same weapon and it's left at the scene of the crime, I mean, prepackaged, guilty, that seems a little bit absurd.
I appreciate that, Dan. And Dan did send me his emails, and of course, preparing for the conference, and I went back to going to college, so I didn't have time to put the information. He's got great information, and I am going to do kind of a Medgar Evers 2.0 presentation. Maybe I can do that in Dallas, or we'll do it in the spring again. This is not the only time we're going to do, I'm hoping this will not be the only time we do Medgar Evers in our group presentation. Because obviously Ryan's got great information. Dan has given me some stuff. I did send out contacts to get a hold of Rena and also Jerry Mitchell, and I'm hoping, I've waited until January to get a hold of them, but hey, everybody's busy. They're doing things, so I'm hoping I can reach out to them. I'd like to get some information from them, but Dan has got great information that I'll put in the next presentation.
Also, I will mention that Merle is still alive, and she just did an interview for a film, so
Okay.
still are people connected with the case.
Yeah, reason why I reached out to Rena was I wanted the family to know that, doing our conference, they may not be aware. I mean, we're not, well, technically, thanks to Zoom, we're kind of global. I mean, we do have, people from outside the United States that takes an interest in what we're doing, but I don't know if they know what we're doing. So I would have liked to have been able to reach out and let them know that we were going to talk about Medgar here at the conference, and I was hoping to do at least a short 5-minute Zoom clip to at least get an introduction from her or someone in the family, or Jerry Mitchell for that matter too. So I will continue working on that. I'd love to sit down and talk to Jerry Mitchell. Getting back to the thing as far as the 30-06 rifle, that's one of the most popular hunting rifles back in the 60s and even now. So, Larry?
Yeah, and talking about the 30-06, that's the first rifle that was found on the day of the JFK assassination at Buell Wesley Frazier's house in Irving with ammo and everything. And it was the first rifle mentioned. And then from there, we went to a Mauser and then finally to a Carcano.
Yeah. And thanks for that, Larry. Yeah, I mean, the 30-06, think of it as kind of I don't want to make comparisons. Yes, I'm definitely a gun supporter. I pack usually pretty regularly. But, the 30-06 got mentioned a lot, just like the AR-15 gets mentioned today. So I think it's because it's readily available. It's an excellent rifle. I wish they wouldn't use it to assassinate people, but, if you want to go kill a deer with it, hey, go for it. But, yeah, I think that's the reason why that rifle, like I say, it was popular for the time. But it is strange, though, that, it's mentioned first in Dealey and then also with James Earl Ray. So, but again, that's something else I'll cover in another presentation. Yes, sir.
Where did Dale Beckwith serve? What prison did he serve, and how was he treated there?
Ryan, I'm drawing a blank.
He was in protective custody. At first, he was going to Parchman. Parchman is the most notorious correctional facility outside of Angola in the Deep South. When Beckwith was convicted in '94, he went to Parchman and then ended up in the Central Mississippi facility there. He never had to be housed with African American population except for an intake. And from what I was heard, this is a rumor, but he didn't get a warm welcome. At the age of, he was about 70 when he went in, so they didn't give him any mercy.
Yeah, the sad part about it is unlike the victims usually, the murderer, they seem to get a life sentence, or they get a chance to get away with it for quite some time before they're actually apprehended and have to serve any time. But I look back and I see like JFK, RFK, Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., just to name a few, because there's way more than that during the turbulent 1960s. The assassinations that went on then was rampant. The list is long. But if they wouldn't have been cut down in their prime, imagine what could have happened, what they could have done, and where we might be today in a better position than where we are now. So it's food for thought. But any more questions? All right. I want to thank Ryan Jones again for helping me on this, and it's been a pleasure. I'll see you this evening. Thank you, Don. All right.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, David Knight and Ryan Jones. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate presentations like that. And I've had conversations with some of the presenters over the last number of months. And I think it's important that we do some beginning level presentations, because so many of the conferences that I've been to, so many of the presentations, or almost all the presentations, are aimed at really people who've been into the weeds and digging down for the minutia. And I think it's important, if we're going to bring in younger people, to give them an introduction, and even for some of us who've been in the weeds for a while, to remind us of some of the details that we may easily have forgotten. So I appreciate these kind of presentations, and one of the reasons that I am involved in this is to create a historical record, to be able to get these presenters, these researchers, these witnesses on tape, so that future generations, future researchers will have the opportunity to hear their words, to be able to build on their research and to build on their witness statements, to hopefully bring to future generations what we don't yet have publicly available. So I appreciate those, because we really need to bring in the younger generation, because so many of us here are older. We need that younger generation. We need their interest. We need them to continue looking into what it is that we're currently looking into. And so I appreciate that. Thank you, David. Great presentation.